So the assessments for the courses. So this is the general outline of what it's going to look like. So there's for the principles, the science, and the production. There's this layout for the assessment where there's a portfolio which is 80%, and that is kind of building up to the report that's 20%. So this is the kind of the summary that wraps up the whole learning of the topic, and this is the kind of staged learning that you progress through as you go through the course. So you've done the quizzes, and there's three of them, and they all add up to the 20%. And for this one, we've done the ecology, the grazing, and the design. So that was the 3 topics for the principles, but the others will also have 3 topics as part of those courses. So there'll be the same sort of structure of the quizzes. And then we do the end of topic test and the practical skills doing the block course. So the practical skills is just when we're out and about on a farm, there'll be some sort of practical activity that you need to do while you're there. So for this next block course, you'll be going to the Quaker settlement, and I'll give you some maps of all the different plants and trees that are in a typical forest, and you have a look at the forest edge composition, and you've got to draw a map to represent that. So generally, when you're looking at the layers of a forest, you've got, we won't get too complicated, but generally you've got the canopy trees and the sub-canopy and the shrubs and the ground cover, and then you've got the climbers, and each one of those is made of a community of different plants. So there may be 3 or 4 different plant species that are part of each layer. So what we're going to do is draw some sort of simple map like this to represent the different layers, and then say what the different species that were part of that layer were. So I've got some maps to help you do that, and the goal at the end of that day is to be able to have some representation of that Bushy Park native forest. And the idea of doing this is that once we've got an idea about what range of plants you get at different layers, and then making some notes of that, so having some sort of observation field record notes. So you might have some notes on the canopy and the sub-canopy, and what you're trying to note here is the characteristics of those plants. So you've noted what they are, and you've got some characteristics of the plant, and then you've got a framework of how you can design an orchard. So when we go to the Quaker orchard, there's another orchard there that we're going to do the same exercise for, but there's not going to be so many different layers in the Quaker orchard. There may be only some ground cover, for example. Maybe a canopy and a sub-canopy tree. And there may only be just one species for each type. So once we've got an idea of how in nature that kind of community is structured, we can then translate that into the orchard design to come up with a design that better represents that kind of complexity. So there's 3 drawings you need to do. So your first drawing is going to be that with some field notes, and then you've got a second drawing with some field notes, and then your third thing that you'll need to do in the afternoon is a design of a more complex orchard planting that you can do at this Quaker site. So this would be an orchard design. So these 3 drawings is what and your field notes is what I mark you on for the practical skills on the day. So and it's not too complicated. It's just that you've listed the species, that you've noted their characteristics, and you can come up with some sort of design of productive tree species based on that design. And then these notes you'll then take away with you to form what you'll do for your report. So for your report, it's going to be describing the design of this. So it's, you'll be describing this pattern, and this pattern's called stratification. So stratification just means layers of plants. So you'll describe what it's like at that Bushy Park orchard, forest. You'll describe what it's like at the Quaker settlement. And then you'll present your design, and you'll describe, your thinking behind your design. So you can change your design, you can add to it, and you can, I encourage you to do more research on it for this report. And you'll have a couple of weeks to kind of put all those ideas together and do some extra reading and put it all together as your report. So yeah, that's the idea of the practical skills anyway. It's just kind of a simple kind of task that we can do during that block course of some sort of practical orientation. Because we're doing ecology for this first one, it's a kind of an ecology mapping exercise. But for the other ones, it could be pruning trees, or it could be building compost, or doing some sort of planting, or some other kind of practical thing, depending on what the topic's about. Also, the end-of-topic test is going to be during the block course, so we're going to do that on the Saturday afternoon. So that's why it's good to make sure you've done all your quizzes, you've watched all the videos, you've done all the extra reading, so that you can do well in this end-of-topic test. And then the article review, I'll introduce that on the Saturday or Sunday, and that's just an extra reading that you can use to help with writing the report. So one of the skills I want to kind of embed in this whole curriculum is your ability to read some articles and extract the information about it, to be able to construct some paragraphs from that. So once you, the first stage is often to think about the design of your report. So your report might have, an introduction, and then in this case you'd be describing a forest layers and the Bushy Park site and the Quaker site. And then in agriculture, if we apply this kind of concept to it, it's called a food forest. So a food forest is a multi-layered, productive planting of trees and shrubs and things like that. So you could describe that concept and then introduce your design, and then maybe some sort of summary. So once you've got an idea about what your report's going to contain, and you start to, you might have 5 different articles that you've reviewed. So I recommend printing them off. So for one of those articles, you're going to have 20% of your assessment. So I've kind of embedded one article review in it already. So through completing the assessment, you'll kind of go through the process of extracting the information out of it. But what I suggest you do is for each of these you have a different highlighter, for example. You can go through and highlight the information from each article that is the most relevant to each topic. So all the parts that describe a food forest you'd highlight in green. You might find some background information on the Quaker or Bushy Park site, and you could highlight that in yellow or blue, or the food forest layers in red. And then when you come to write your final report, you can refer to that information and writing your final report. And the trick is to write your narrative, so to describe it. So narrative is like storytelling, so it's like you telling the story. And you're taking this information out to support the story that you're telling. So it's you telling the story, but it's being supported by information from these different sources. And then at the end, having references where you cite the information that you obtained. So your 5 different articles you put in